welcome back. And if you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name's Christina Kent, and I'm a fine artist based out of San Francisco. And in this video, I wanted to talk all about artist residencies. So last year, I did 2 artist residencies. I posted some vlogs about those, and a lot of people asked me questions that they had about artist residencies, like what is an artist residency exactly? How do you find artist residencies? What's the application process like? And so in this video, I wanted to sort of demystify the artist residency process and what they are, because I think even for myself, when I started really doing art seriously and pursuing art as a career, I myself didn't know what exactly artist residencies were, how to get them, or anything like that. And I think it can be hard to find good information online about this. So I wanted to make this video to demystify artist residencies, hopefully answer some of your questions, and give you a better idea on whether or not an artist residency is right for you. So to start, I want to talk about what is an artist residency exactly. And I think it's hard to really define it because it is such a huge umbrella term. So I think if I had to give a very general definition that would encompass all of the artist residencies I've seen, I would say that an artist residency is an opportunity for an artist to go to a specific location and to be doing their artistic, creative work there. Now, this can include either creating work, creating a new body of work, but it also encompasses things like teaching and also community engagement. So that's a pretty broad definition, but I think that covers most of the artist residencies that I've seen. The most common artist residency I've seen is one that is production focused. So the artist is going to a place, and the idea is that while they're in that location, they have this very focused time. Oftentimes they get housing and a studio, sometimes even meals provided. And the idea is that they're going to be building a specific body of work or a specific project while they're there. But there are also teaching-focused artist residencies. So an artist will go to a certain place and they'll stay there for a while. And maybe instead of just focusing on making work, they'll also be focusing on creating and doing a workshop for the people, the artists who live in that area. Also, there's ones that are more focused on community engagement. I'm less familiar with these, but I've heard of them as well. So that's also something to keep in mind. And so you might be asking, why do an artist residency? What are the benefits? So I found that the benefits of doing an artist residency, there are quite a few benefits. The first, especially if it's a production-based residency, is that it gives you this time and space to really focus on your creative work. So maybe back home, you have all these other things you need to do, you have all these other distractions, but a residency can provide you with this very focused space to really make progress on the work that you want to do. Oftentimes, they try to create an environment that's very conducive to productivity. So maybe you're out in a more rural area, you have a great studio space to work with. Maybe there are other artists around who are also working on their projects, but the idea is to just create this space where you can really dive deep into your creative work, which oftentimes we don't get in our everyday lives. Even if we're full-time artists, oftentimes there are other things we have to do, other things that are taking away our attention that makes it harder to focus on our work. Another benefit of doing an artist residency is that they often involve travel, so you get to go to somewhere new. To be an artist in residence, it implies that you're in that area. And as far as I know, most artist residencies are true to that. So I haven't seen any virtual residencies. I think that might be an oxymoron, but they could exist. But mostly what I've seen, you actually need to be in the place. And so traveling to somewhere new can be a great boost to your creativity because you get to see what it's like in this new location, this new environment. And I found that especially if I'm in sort of a creative rut, going to a new place can sort of shake up the way that I'm seeing the world and help inspire my creativity. Another benefit of artist residencies is making connections with other artists. So a lot of artist residencies There are some that are more retreat style where it's just you go off to a location and you're working by yourself. But a lot of artist residencies are actually more group focused. So they might have anywhere from 3 to even 10 artists all in one location. And you're all kind of in one cohort working on your own work, but you're all around each other. Maybe you're meeting up for meals. You're going out to explore local galleries together or go see the local landscape. And so, in this way, you can get to know other artists from around the country or even from around the world. The residency I did last year in Newfoundland was very much like this. So, there were about 9 of us artists all working on our projects there. And mostly we stayed in our own studios getting our work done. It was very production focused, but we also took time to go on hikes together, to go visit other parts of the area and have meals together. And that was really, really nice because I got to meet a lot of artists that I wouldn't have met. They were artists from the East Coast, from Canada. And these are artists that I just wouldn't have run into being in California. And I found as an artist, it's always so helpful and stimulating to meet people from other places, to meet artists in particular from other places, and to see what they're doing. At the same time, you can get a more retreat-focused residency, like I said, and the one that I did in Sonoma, California was much more like that. So it was just me in my studio. There weren't any other artists there. And that was also great because it provided a lot of really focused time to um, to go deep into my creative process and dive into my work. So now that I've talked about the benefits of artist residencies, I want to talk a little bit more about just the diversity of residencies that exist out there to give you an idea of the whole scope. But before I get too into it, I also want to just address the fact that in my experience, I feel like artist residencies are very impractical for probably most people to do. So, unless you're a full time artist or you have a lot of flexibility with your work, you don't have like caregiving duties, things like that, I found artist residencies can be really hard to participate in. So, if you have a full time job, if you have children that you care for or family members that you care for, I think that makes it really hard to get out and do an artist residency. One of the main reasons is because they tend to be for longer periods of time. Um, I've seen most common, what I've seen is about a month. So for most people, if you have a full-time job, you're not going to be able to just leave that for a month and go off and do it. That being said, if you're retired, if you have a flexible job, if you are between jobs, or maybe you're a teacher and so you have the summer periods available, or of course, if you're a full-time artist, then it makes it a lot easier for you to be able to take advantage of these residencies. And also, there are some residencies that do allow family to come either for the whole time or for a period of time. So it is possible, but those are a bit harder to find, and you're going to have to be a lot more, you're going to have to look a lot further to identify those residencies. But if you are a parent, know that they are out there. It is an option. So just keep that in mind when you're looking. Okay, so what are some of the different types of residencies? So as I mentioned earlier, some are more production focused, some are more teaching focused, some are more community focused. Some residencies will provide you with housing and a studio. Other residencies maybe just provide you with a studio space. Some residencies are kind of made for artists to travel to that location. So those are the ones that usually will provide housing too. But other residencies, like a few in San Francisco that I know of, they only provide you with the studio and they're kind of longer term, maybe even like 3 months of a residency. So if you live in a big city, there might be some residencies that are more geared towards people who already live there. And it's more about getting the artists to come to this particular location and maybe teach classes there as well. So keep that in mind too. For the artist residencies that provide housing and allow you to travel, one thing you want to look at is how long is this residency? So the shortest I've seen is usually around 2 weeks. And then the most common amount is around a month long. And then there are some that are even longer. So if you have some flexibility with your location, with travel, if you have a whole summer off maybe, then you might be able to do one of these longer residencies. If you have less time, you'll want to focus on the shorter residencies. I found for me, a month is about the sweet spot. I don't like to be gone too long, but at the same time, I found um, it usually takes me about a few days to get settled into the new studio. And then because I'm an oil painter, I usually have to stop painting like a week before I leave. So if I want to be able to have my paintings at least touch dry and roll them up and take them home, then I can't really be painting much in the last week. So for me, one of the 2 week long residencies doesn't make much sense if I'm going to be traveling far, but I found a month works really well. Another thing to consider is it a solo residency or are there going to be other artists there? So if you really just want to focus on your own stuff, you should look at the solo residencies. But if you want to have some of that creative dialogue, if you want to network with other artists, meet other artists from other parts of the world, then one of these more community-focused residencies can be a really good option. Especially if you live in a small town and there aren't many other artists around, I would definitely look at these more community-focused residencies because it can really give you a chance to meet other artists in other areas and make those connections. Another thing that I've noticed about artist residencies that seems to be a source of a lot of confusion and really confused me at first is the price. So when I was first looking at residencies and I just searched for some on Google, I found a lot of these residencies that were in beautiful locations. They had these amazing studios and accommodations. And then I checked, and they were actually very expensive to apply to and to go to. And there are a lot of these residencies out there. I don't know if they would all be considered this, but they almost seem like for-profit residencies to me, just based on how expensive they were. And in that sense, to me, I was like, well, I could just book my own accommodation somewhere and make my own nice residency if I wanted that experience. So I generally focus on residencies that are either highly subsidized, so maybe they require a small fee, but it's not very expensive, or they're free, or even some residencies will pay a stipend. Now, you can probably imagine that if a residency is free, if it's giving you free housing, a free studio, sometimes even food, then it's going to be very competitive. There are a lot of artists who are looking for these residencies. At the same time, it also tends to be more prestigious. So if you get one of these residencies, and this is more relevant if you are doing art as a career, so you're putting this on your resume and you're trying to network with other artists. But I will say that the free or stipend residencies do tend to be harder to get into and more prestigious. That being said, if you have the money, one of these paid residencies could totally work for you. So I just want you to know, and I wanted to address the confusion because some people said, oh, I got offered this residency, but it's very expensive. Is that normal? That is normal. There are a lot of residencies like that, but then there are also lots of residencies that are free. They just tend to be more competitive. And when it comes to paying for a residency, I would just ask myself, what are the benefits that I'm getting from this? Am I getting a greater benefit than I would taking this money and just booking my own art vacation? Is it really worth the money that I'm paying for this residency? Other things to consider about residencies are, is it within your country or is it international? International residencies are awesome. I loved going to Canada, but at the same time, logistically, they can be way more complicated. If you are going to an international residency, just keep in mind that you'll have to figure out how to ship your work back and forth across the border. And you'll also have to figure out maybe shipping supplies if you can't get them on site. So all of these things can be really tricky. Another thing to consider is the residency in an urban area or a rural area? If you're in an urban area, you'll probably be a lot more connected to art galleries and maybe you'll get to see more of the art community there. If you're in a more rural area, it might be easier to focus on your work, but at the same time, you'll be a lot more isolated. You might not meet as many other people. And so if that community element is important to you, it's something to keep in mind. Also, if you're in a rural area, you have to think about transportation. Like you might even want to rent a car. When I was doing my residency in Newfoundland, they had a car that the residents could use. And that was really helpful because without it, we wouldn't have been able to get groceries or travel to different areas to go on hikes and see the landscape. So these are the factors that I keep in mind when deciding residencies that I want to apply for. Okay, so let's say you've picked the type of residency that you want to do. How do you actually find residencies that fit into this category? So this can be really hard. As I mentioned, when I first started looking at residencies, I just searched on Google and I found a lot of these very expensive paid residencies that were not what I was looking for. I also found websites that are kind of databases of residencies that are out there, but I found that these also showed me a lot of residencies that just weren't a good fit for me. So now what do I do? Now, my favorite method for finding residencies is really just through other artists. I talk to artist friends that I have, or I also look at artists that I follow on Instagram and I keep an eye out for what residencies these artists are doing because I feel like if I really like this artist and they enjoyed doing this residency, then chances are I would like the residency too. Another thing that I'll do when I'm looking for residencies is I'll go to the website of an artist I like, I'll look at their about page or their CV and see if they've listed any residencies that they've done in the past. Now, let's say that you've identified the residencies to apply for. What is the application process like? So a lot of applications will ask for several things: your artist CV, some examples of your work, maybe letters of recommendation, maybe a project statement of what you want to do while you're at the residency. And also, it's pretty common for the applications to have a small application fee. And so, when it comes to applying, a lot of artists ask me, well, I'm an emerging artist. I don't have many things on my CV. Is that okay? And I would say, yes, that's totally normal if you're an emerging artist. Just keep in mind that it might be harder to get the more prestigious residencies, but there are a lot of residencies that are less selective, and they totally understand that emerging artists aren't going to have this long list on their CV. I would also say put whatever you can think of on your CV. So if you don't have any shows at galleries, but you put your art in a cafe or in your local library or things like that, you can put that. Or if you had an open studios event at your house, I would put that too, because people understand you're an emerging artist, you don't have that much experience. I would just put anything that kind of shows that you're putting yourself out there and you're showing your work. Also, for the project statement, think about what you would like to do while you're there. Be very specific on what you have in mind, but at the same time, don't worry too much if your plans change. In my experience, the residency, they want to see that you have a plan for how you're going to use your time, but they don't force you to stick to it when you get there. They just want to know that you really thought about how you're going to use your time well while you're there. And for the references, don't worry about this too much. Just put people who know about your work and can speak well about it. For me, especially when I was just starting out and I didn't know curators or galleries or things like that, I would just put my artist friends, people that I painted with who saw my work and saw also my dedication as an artist. I also want to note here that there are some artist residencies that are invite only. So if you do want to do one of these residencies, it can be really hard to figure out how to get invited. My best tip would be to follow that residency on social media. Also follow the artists who've done that residency. And if you can meet any of them and talk with them about the residency, that could help. But ultimately, these invite-only residencies can be really hard to get. So just keep that in mind. Another thing I will note about residencies is that they are oftentimes really competitive. So don't be surprised if you get rejected. And if there's a residency that you really want to do, I would recommend, keep applying to it every year. Your work is going to get better, your work will get stronger, and don't give up if you get rejected the first time, especially if you're just starting out, especially if you've never done a residency before. Getting rejected is totally normal. I just got a rejection from a residency this week, so if you got rejected, you're not alone. So anyway, I hope this was a helpful overview of artist residencies and it's maybe demystified or answered some of the questions that you have about residencies. If you do have other questions, feel free to post them in the comments and I'll answer them as best I can. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, a huge shout out to my supporters on Patreon. Thank you for supporting this channel and making these videos happen. If you like my art, if you like my videos, and you want to help me make more, check out my Patreon at the link. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.